Story 1. The Forgotten Smells of Ancient Rome's Bathhouses. You are walking toward the Thermae, the Roman public bathhouse, just as the sun has started to mellow. The dusty stones of the via beneath your sandals are warm from the day's sun, and the scent of olive oil and faint wood smoke clings to the air. You pass through the forica, the public latrine near the entrance where the mingling aromas are far from refined but essential to the Roman city's scentscape. And that's the beginning of this story. A city of smells. Forgotten, but once unforgettable. Because the story of Roman bathhouses is not just about marble, steam, and social politics, it's about the aromatic memory of a civilization that bathed itself in olive oil, scraped its skin with strigils, and lived among the perfumes of eucalyptus, sweat, and soot. The architecture of aroma. The Thermae were not uniform. Some were grand, like the baths of Caracalla, vast complexes with soaring domes and mosaic floors. Others were modest neighborhood facilities tucked into the folds of city blocks, but all of them participated in the ritual choreography of cleanliness, and more importantly, they were containers of smell deliberately designed to amplify or neutralize them. You first enter the apoditerium, the changing room. It's dark, humid, and busy with murmurs. The smell here is a mixture of sweaty tunics, beeswax used to waterproof leather sandals, and the faint scent of metal coins stashed in terracotta cubbies. This was the olfactory entry point, a small sensory shock that reminded the bather of the world they were about to leave behind. Next came the tepidarium, the warm room, the true heart of the Roman bath. The heat was mild here, not as overwhelming as the caldarium, but warm enough to loosen joints and invite conversation. Its smells were layered: warmed plaster walls, floral oils exuded from skin, the pungent tang of bronze containers, and the faint mineral undertones of the hypocaust system heating the floor beneath your feet. It was here that men and women, depending on the schedule and day, began the transformation. Not just physical cleansing, but a smell metamorphosis from street to sanctum. Strigils and oil, clean by scraping. Unlike the soap and shower rituals of today, Romans used oil to clean themselves, rubbing it onto their skin and then scraping it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. The olive oil, sometimes perfumed with herbs like thyme or marjoram, would lift the dirt and sweat from the skin as it was peeled away. You'd be surprised by how sharp the smell of used oil can be, especially when stored in communal flasks or reused by less scrupulous attendants. Some oil was mixed with ashes or even sand to improve its grip. After being scraped off, it might be collected in a container. This discarded mix of oil, skin cells, and sweat was called fuligo, and sometimes sold as a rudimentary ointment or used in tanning. So imagine the tepidarium again, not as sterile, but as alive with motion, steam, and bodily scent. The oils sizzled slightly on warm skin, and as they were scraped, a new scent arose, earthy, fatty, not altogether pleasant. This was not a room that smelled clean by modern standards. It was ritualistically pungent, an atmosphere cultivated rather than removed. A place of rank and the smell of status. The Roman elite did not smell like the plebeians, and this was very much by design. Wealthier patrons brought their own blends of oil, some infused with imported fragrances like spikenard from India, saffron from Cilicia, or myrrh from Arabia. The cost of these oils was prohibitive for most, but their smell lingered and announced wealth silently. Even after the oils were scraped away, a trace remained on the skin, mingling with the steam and wood smoke from the hypocaust. Meanwhile, the poorer classes, those using communal oils or relying on the unadorned stuff, often left the baths smelling faintly of rancid olives and boiled leather. That smell stuck to the skin, and later, to the crowded insulae apartment buildings where they lived. The smell of a Roman was not personal, it was socially encoded. One could almost read a man's station by the oil he used. Steam and smoke, the working heart of the bathhouse. Below the floor, the real work happened. The hypocaust system, the Roman underfloor heating mechanism, was fueled by vast amounts of wood and labor. Slaves toiled in sweltering conditions, feeding fires that burned constantly to keep the baths warm. The soot would creep up through vents and sometimes leak into the rooms, giving them a faint but persistent campfire musk. You rarely smelled clean air in a Roman bathhouse. It was always an alchemical blend: hot bricks, smoky vapor, and the earthy tang of sweating bodies. There was eucalyptus, too, brought in from the east, crushed and burned to give a medicinal clarity to the steam rooms. This was a relatively rare addition, but in elite baths or during particular festivals, it added a camphorous scent that cut through the richness of body oils and wood smoke. Slaves, labor, and the hidden sense of work. You do not see the cloaca maxima, the great sewer, but you smell its distant breath. Some bathhouses were built near these channels to make drainage easier. The faint, warm breeze of decay filtered up from the drains, especially when the water pressure dropped or storms stirred up the system. And yet, the bathhouse remained comfortably clean by ancient standards, a refuge from the filth of the city streets. But this illusion of cleanliness was built on the back of invisible labor: enslaved men and women who stoked the fires, scrubbed the floors, hauled water, and prepared oils. Their quarters, often just behind the caldarium, were rarely cleaned. Here, the smell was different: burnt oil, moldy straw, and fatigue. The patrons never entered these spaces, but their experience depended entirely upon them. The final room: frigidarium and re-entry to the world. The frigidarium, or cold plunge, was a shock to the senses. After sweating and scraping and steaming, you would immerse yourself in cold water. The smells here were sharper stone, lime, and old water, a clean, biting freshness. It was not perfumed. It was functional. It was a return to the real world and to the subtle clinging odors of reality: the faint smoke on your tunic, the trace of time in your hair, the memory of heat on your skin. You leave the bathhouse feeling cleaner, yes, but not scentless. You carry the legacy of the bath, the smell of society, of industry, of empire. And now we ask, what did it mean, truly, to be clean in a world where water was ritual but not cleansing? What happened when the baths went quiet and the fires below the hypocaust burned out for good? You return not as a patron this time, but as a worker, one of the many who made the bathhouses hum quietly beneath the surface. You pass the elegant mosaic entrance of the thermae, but do not use it. Instead, you enter from a side passage, low and narrow, the air cooler and close. It smells faintly of wet ashes, boiled linen, and something else: the sour tang of bodies that do not bathe. Because you don't bathe here, not unless granted rare permission. Your role is to serve, to carry fuel, to collect oil, to clean stone with vinegar and lime. The baths, so often remembered for their patrons, were just as much the domain of the unseen many who powered the Roman pursuit of leisure. The hypocaust, a machine of flame and labor. The hypocaust system remains one of Rome's most celebrated feats of engineering, but it was also a machine that consumed lives as much as it consumed fuel. A typical bathhouse required several tons of wood per day to maintain its various chambers. The caldarium, hottest of all, sat above a forest of brick pillars which allowed hot air and smoke from the furnace prefurnium to circulate beneath the marble floors and heat the walls. This meant that laborers had to constantly stoke the fires, feed the flames, and maintain the draft without automation, in heat that scorched the lungs. The smell was metallic from constant friction and sweat, resinous from pine logs, and laced with the scent of damp stone as water from the baths above trickled down through cracks. It was a pungent, choked sort of air, and few ever escaped it once bound to that work. Sometimes slaves were punished by being sent to the furnaces as permanent duty. These men were called hypocausi servi, and though they kept the elite warm, their own lives were lived in perpetual smoke. Cleaning the uncleanable. One of your morning tasks might be to scrub the tepidarium walls with vinegar water. The stone absorbs oil, sweat, and salt, leaving a residue that must be lifted daily. Brushes made from palm fibers or horsehair cut through the layers, but the smell remains deep in the marble. No matter how often you clean, there is always a film of humanity. At night, once the last bather has gone and the bathhouse begins to fall silent, you collect the discarded strigil scrapings, the fuligo. Some of this will be sold to craftsmen who use it in tanning or even as a base for rudimentary salves. It smells of old fat, dried blood, and the faint sweetness of decaying herbs from the oils once applied. The odor clings to your hands even after washing, and worse, it clings to your sleep. Fragrance as function, the ancient Roman deodorant strategy. Romans did not have soap as we know it, but they had fragrance often in layered combinations that were as much strategic as cosmetic. Many patrons brought their own unguentum, a salve made of oil infused with flowers, herbs, or even resins. Popular ingredients included laurel oil, slightly peppery with antimicrobial properties; rose oil, expensive, delicate, used mostly by upper-class women; cinnamon and myrrh, strong, heady, used in colder seasons; costus root, imported from India, earthy and lingering. But these perfumes had more than just aesthetic value. They masked medical odors, the smells of chronic infection, aging skin, and bad teeth. They covered up the rot of urban living. The bathhouse, for all its emphasis on cleanliness, could not eliminate disease. Patrons with skin conditions or parasites were common. Some oils were even mixed with mercury or lead powders, believed to cure certain afflictions. These added their own acrid notes to the already complex scent profile. So you, as a worker, can smell them before they arrive. You can tell by the perfume which senator is visiting. You know who is trying to hide decay beneath rosewater. Rituals of silence and status. In the early hours, the bathhouse is often quiet. Those who come at sunrise are mostly older men, retired soldiers, minor officials, a philosopher or two. They move slowly, methodically, speaking in hushed tones. You notice the habits, how some start in the frigidarium to shock the body, then warm slowly, how others linger in the caldarium to sweat out melancholy. This time is not just about washing, it's a ritual of reset. Some believe the bathhouse was a microcosm of the empire, structured, hierarchical, and intensely performative. The apoditerium was the forum, noisy, chaotic, a place of greetings and gossip. The tepidarium was the senate, warm, balanced, a space of decision. The caldarium was war, intense, punishing, transformative. The frigidarium was death and rebirth. In this way, each bath became a daily reenactment of Roman identity. Gender and the spaces between. Men and women typically bathed separately, either in divided hours or entirely separate buildings. But there were exceptions. During certain festivals or in frontier regions with smaller facilities, co-ed bathing occurred. The women's baths smelled different. Where men preferred stronger scents, cedar, leather, myrrh, women often used violet, rose, and almond oil. Midwives would recommend narcissus extract for postpartum care, and some elite women had oils made from crushed pearls or rare spices, which were believed to preserve youth. But not all women could afford this. Enslaved women who cleaned these spaces worked around broken amphorae of spoiled oil and washed menstrual cloths in basins that weren't always emptied. And just as status clung to the perfumes of men, disrespect clung to the labor of women, their contributions vanishing into the steam. The closing hours, after the water falls still. As dusk fell, the bathhouse began to empty. The water cooled. The light dimmed. You would sweep the suspensory, the raised floors, looking for dropped coins, stray jewelry, or forgotten sandals. Then you would mop the floors with warm vinegar, not to clean them fully, but to soften the stench that would otherwise steep overnight. In these quiet hours, the bathhouse smelled of cooled stone, iron, and tiredness. The perfumes had faded. The smoke had cleared. The heat had withdrawn into the walls. It is in this moment that you realize cleanliness was not about removal, it was about rhythm, daily application, daily scraping, a temporary state that must be renewed tomorrow and the day after that. But this raises a question. What happens when that rhythm breaks? When the fires go out, and the baths are no longer fed with wood, oil, and sweat? It begins slowly. The fires beneath the hypocaust burn a little less brightly each morning. The smell of burning pine, once thick and alive, starts to fade. You notice it in the silence. First, the laborers below the baths no longer whistle or mutter as they work. Wood deliveries become infrequent. Cracks in the marble go unrepaired. The warm hum of the bathhouse begins to cool. And then one day, a patron enters the tepidarium and finds only lukewarm stone beneath his feet. The thermi, once the humming lungs of the Roman city, begin to slow their breath. The collapse beneath the surface. By the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, the great bathhouses of Rome and its provinces were already showing signs of decay not visible to the eye at first, but sensed through small details. Unrepaired tiles, thinner oils, slower steam. The Roman economy had begun to shift. The empire's expansion had slowed, and the long, expensive process of maintaining monumental civic spaces like the baths became increasingly difficult. Taxes rose. Wood shortages plagued cities like Rome and Antioch. Slave populations declined as conquest ceased. Public bathhouses, heavily subsidized by imperial funding or private patrons, started to be seen as costly luxuries rather than civic necessities. And with each passing year, they smelled less of eucalyptus and myrrh, and more of mold and still water. For centuries, baths had helped shape the rhythm of daily life. Their decline marked a shift not only in infrastructure, but in the soul of Roman urbanity. The forgotten function of the bathhouse. To call the baths places to wash was always an oversimplification. They were meeting places for business deals and political conversations. Health centers offering massages, minor surgeries, and herbal treatments. Gyms, libraries, lecture halls. Ritual spaces, where even the act of sweating was symbolic of moral cleansing. As they declined, so too did the social glue that held Roman urban life together. Citizens met less often. Gossip found no home. Philosophers lost their stages. Children no longer splashed in the frigidarium while their mothers applied almond oil by the window. The city began to feel less human, less alive. The smells that once gave identity to each room and ritual disappeared. From perfume to piety, a shift in sensory values. By the time Christianity became the dominant religion of the empire, the bathhouses were already undergoing a cultural transformation. Where once fragrance had been a celebration of the body, now it was increasingly seen as vanity or corruption. The scent of oil no longer spoke of health and civilization, but of hedonism. Ritual bathing, formerly daily, began to be replaced by the idea of moral purity over physical cleanliness. Clergy discouraged mixed bathing. Some church fathers condemned elaborate perfumes as distractions from spiritual focus. And where the old gods had once been worshipped in statues and temples, now asceticism began to perfume the air. People bathed less. Oils went rancid in forgotten amphorae. The once pungent, complex aroma of Rome's bathhouses gave way to something new: dust, mildew, abandonment. The echoes in the stone. Even centuries after their decline, the ruins of bathhouses remained. In Rome, Caracalla's great complex still stood a skeleton of arches and empty pools. Grass grew where steam once swirled. Birds nested in furnace ducts. But even in ruin, the bathhouses carried a faint memory. Archaeologists today still uncover traces of oils embedded in marble, burned patterns on bricks from long-extinguished fires, and scraps of perfume amphorae with dried residue clinging to their interiors. In some cases, Mineral stains on walls reveal where steam once condensed. In others, shards of strigils bear scratches from daily scraping rituals. All silent now, all scentless, but once they breathed. The memory of smell. One of the cruel ironies of history is that smell rarely survives. It cannot be photographed. It leaves no inscription. It clings to pottery, perhaps, or to fibers long decayed. But for Romans, smell was a form of memory. They spoke often of the way a scent could summon a person, a time, a mood. Poets compared the scent of a lover's oil to the return of spring. Philosophers discussed the ideal ratio of oil to ash. Physicians debated which herbs calmed melancholy best when warmed and inhaled. The bathhouse was the museum of all those memories, a symphony of scents from cedarwood to sour vinegar, from saffron to sweat. And now all that is left is silence. The final whiff. You can still walk among the ruins of Roman bathhouses today in Rome, in Trier, in Bath, in Istanbul. You can run your fingers across the same floors that once steamed with heat. You can stand where senators discussed law, where merchants bartered, where children laughed and splashed. But the smell is gone, and with it a world of meanings. So the next time you take a shower, scrub with soap, or stand in the cloud of steam from a modern spa, ask yourself, what does your cleanliness mean to you? Is it for health, for ritual, for memory, or something deeper still? And what one day will remain of your own scent when you are gone? Story 2. The slow art of bread making in medieval monasteries. It is still dark. You are awake not because you choose to be, but because the rhythm of the monastery allows no exception. The bells have not yet rung for matins, the early morning prayer, but already your hands are cold from rinsing them in the stone basin near the entrance to the kitchen. Outside, frost rests thickly on the shutters. Inside, there is no fire yet, no warmth, only silence. You are the monastery's Panarius, the bread maker. It is an office held with quiet pride. It's not a place of status, but of reliability. If you fail, the monks do not eat. If you sleep in, the refectory will fall silent, its long wooden tables empty of loaves. So you move in darkness, muscle and memory guiding you to the flour sacks. The bread of obedience. Bread in the monastery is not simply food. It is obedience in physical form, a daily act of humble labor that reflects the Benedictine rule. Ora et labora, pray and work. Monastic bread making begins with ritual, not recipe. You begin in silence. You do not speak unless absolutely necessary. The first thing you smell is the dusty sweetness of grain, barley, or rye, depending on the region and the season. Wheat is rare and prized, saved for feast days or wealthy visitors. Flour is kept in sacks sewn from coarse linen. The smell, even in the cold air, is alive, dry and sharp, with a hint of the harvest still clinging to it. You run your fingers through the flour and feel its texture, gritty, not fine, with small fragments of husk and straw left behind. It is not white. It is the color of earth warmed by sun. You work by candlelight. Beeswax smoke curls toward the rafters. The bowl in which you will mix the dough is wooden, stained dark from years of use, and its scent, a mixture of yeast, old wood, and ash, tells you of mornings long past, baked into every fiber. Yeast by memory, not measurement. There are no packets of yeast here. The starter lives in a ceramic jar at the back of the kitchen. It is sourdough, cultivated from flour, water, and patience. The yeast is not added, it is invited. You open the jar and sniff, a tang of fermentation like old apples or vinegar. This living culture is fed daily with flour and water. You know it's ready by smell. If it is too sharp, it needs more flour. If too weak, it must rest longer. This is the monastery's quiet secret. Bread is a living thing, and so, in a way, is the kitchen. Once, years ago, a visiting monk from another abbey brought his own starter. It was different, sweeter, softer, better suited to wheat flour. But it never survived in this cold northern kitchen. The monks buried it under a rose bush in silence, as if mourning a creature that had passed. Mixing as devotion. You do not rush. The flour is sifted through a coarse basket to remove stones. Water drawn from the well is cold and must be warmed slightly by the fire, not too hot, or it will kill the yeast. You mix with your hands, not a spoon. The dough is heavy, sticky, stubborn. It resists, then yields. It clings to your palms like wet clay. The smell changes as you mix, from dry grain to damp earth to the sour breath of fermentation. There is no salt in this dough, not in every monastery. Some orders forbid it. Flavor is a form of pride. As the dough comes together, you knead, not quickly but slowly, rhythmically. It is an act of prayer. Some monks say the names of saints as they knead, each push and fold another offering. Push, fold, turn, push, fold. You do this for half an hour, maybe longer. The heat from your hands begins to warm the dough, and in return, it gives off a faint sweetness, the smell of flour becoming food. Rising in the cold. The dough must rest. You wrap it in a damp cloth and place it in the corner near the hearth. The fire is not yet lit, but the stones retain a bit of yesterday's heat. The rising will be slow, perhaps several hours. In winter, it may not rise at all. You cannot control it, you can only prepare. While the dough rests, you sweep the kitchen. The stone floor smells of ashes and spilled oil. You tend the firebox, laying thin kindling, dried twigs, a pine cone, a strip of linen soaked in tallow. The fire begins with a crack, then settles into a hiss. The scent of burning pine resin fills the air, curling into the beams above. It will cling to your robes all day. The monastic oven, hearth of discipline. The oven is stone, shaped like a beehive. You built it with your own hands years ago under the prior's direction. It takes hours to heat and must be watched constantly. Once a novice forgot and let the flames go too high. The loaves that day were charred, bitter, and the smell of burnt crust lingered in the cloister for days. The abbot said nothing, but at the next meal he left his bread untouched. You rake out the coals when the oven is ready. The inside glows with heat, and the ash on the stones turns white. You scatter damp straw to judge the heat. It should smolder, not burn. The smell of wet grass and smoke tells you it's time. The shaping of loaves. The dough has risen, though modestly. You punch it down gently and divide it into loaves. These are not decorative. They are round, heavy, and dusted with bran to prevent sticking. Each is scored with a knife, a simple cross, not just for faith but to control expansion. Even bread must submit to the rule. As you arrange the loaves on wooden boards, you smell their readiness. A mix of raw flour and warm sourness, like the start of vinegar but softened by the promise of baking. The oven door closes with a hollow sound. The air inside shifts, and for the first time today, you allow yourself a moment of stillness. The scent of patience. The monastery is stirring now. The bell for matins rings through the stone corridors. You hear sandals on cold floors. Doors creak. The choir begins to chant the first psalm of the day. And from the oven it begins. The smell arrives slowly, a sweet toastiness that grows deeper with each moment. It seeps through cracks in the kitchen wall, curling into the cloister walk. Novices pause at the threshold, eyes closed, inhaling, not speaking. It is the smell of trust that someone woke early, worked in silence, and prepared what the community needs most. Bread. Warm, humble, honest. And yet you ask yourself, what happens when the bread does not rise? What happens when the hands that knead are no longer there? You lift the loaves from the oven with a long wooden paddle. Their crusts are cracked, not golden but a mottled brown-gray, tinged with the ash and heat of the hearth. You place them on the cooling rack's simple wooden slats by the wall. The air is heavy now with the dense, nutty aroma of rye, the sweetness of long fermentation, and the faintest trace of smoke from the oven's open mouth. They do not look like modern bread. They are rough, irregular, and heavy. Each loaf could last a week. Some will. But for today they are still warm, still soft in the center, and they will be eaten in silence. Bread as a measure of time. In the monastery, time is not a straight line. It loops and returns like the seasons, like the prayers, like the rising of dough. The rule of Saint Benedict does not prioritize novelty. It prioritizes rhythm. Bread, too, obeys rhythm. Each day, wake before dawn. Mix and knead before lauds. Bake during prime. Serve at terce. Clean before sext. The bread cycle becomes a timekeeper, an alternate clock to the monastic bells. You can tell if the prayers are early or late by how the dough behaves. On warm days, it rises too fast. On wet days, it stays flat. In winter, you wait longer and hope for the best. You do not write recipes, you remember. The smell of the sponge tells you if it's ready. The weight in your hand says whether to add water. The sound of the crust when tapped, like knuckles on wood, tells you it's baked through. The refectory, silence and service. When it is time for the noon meal, the brothers enter the refectory in a quiet line. They do not speak. A single monk reads from scripture while the others eat. You help serve. Each monk receives one loaf about the size of his palm and a bowl of pottage. On feast days, cheese or dried fruit is added. Wine is served watered down. The bread is often broken, not cut, a small echo of the sacred ritual of the Eucharist, even outside Mass. The room smells now of warm barley, of old wood, of damp wool cloaks drying from the morning mist. It is not a rich scent, but a comforting one. A smell that says, "Here, for now, you are fed." Bread and hierarchy. Not all bread is equal. Though the rule insists on simplicity and humility, monasteries are still communities of rank. The abbot eats a different loaf made with better flour, finer crumb, and sometimes sweetened with honey on feast days. Visitors, especially bishops or noble patrons, receive wheat bread, milled more finely and baked in smaller, softer rounds. You prepare these loaves with greater care, more kneading, longer rise times, less ash on the crust. You may even scent the flour with herbs, fennel, anise, or a touch of lavender if the season allows. This bread smells brighter, lighter, less of struggle, more of celebration. You do not eat it yourself. Waste not. Nothing is discarded. Crusts left over are dried and crushed into panada, a thickened gruel for the sick. Hardened loaves are grated into crumbs and added to soup. If bread molds, which is rare in the dry air of the kitchen, it is fed to animals or burned. Some monasteries keep the first crust of each batch, the first fruit, a spiritual offering to be buried in the garden soil. The belief is not superstitious. It's symbolic. Even what we eat must return to the earth, nourishing more than just bodies. Even the scent of the bread has purpose. At certain feast days, loaves are placed on altars not to be eaten, but to carry their warmth and smell into the chapel, mingling with incense, beeswax, and myrrh. A strange mixture, but one that elevates the ordinary. The mill and the grain. Behind the monastery, across the field, lies the mill. It hums softly in spring and summer, quiet in winter. The flour you use does not arrive in sacks from anonymous sellers. It is ground by brothers who labor daily under the turning wheel, harnessing stream or animal. You visit occasionally to help or to carry back flour, but mostly to inhale that familiar breath of ground grain, warm, raw, and somehow still full of promise. The air inside the mill is choked with fine dust. It clings to skin and hair. The scent follows you back to the kitchen, as if to remind the bread where it came from. Some monks take vows of silence, others of labor. But the ones who work the mill, like you, know the rhythm of the monastery through touch and scent, not words. The occasional failures. Sometimes the bread does not rise. The yeast goes dormant. The flour is bad. The fire burns too hot or too cold. A novice leaves the dough uncovered overnight and rats nibble the edges. These loaves are still served. There is no pride in perfection here, only in effort. And yet when the loaves are dense and sour, the room grows quieter. Chewing takes longer. Some leave their crusts behind. The smell that day is bitter, heavy. You feel it in your stomach before you even eat. You learn to take note, not blame. Tomorrow you begin again. A single crumb of history. Centuries later, archaeologists will find traces of this bread, blackened fragments in hearths, hardened crusts preserved in dry cellars, ancient ovens whose walls still carry the soot of your fires. They may test the crumbs, identify the grains. They may even recreate your recipe. But they will never quite capture the smell of your kitchen at dawn. The beeswax, the sour starter, the warm, sleepy steam of rising dough. The scent of trust, of patience, of labor done without fame. And still you wonder, what will the world remember of a bread that was never meant to be remembered? If bread is a daily miracle, can the miracle survive when no one notices it anymore? The bells toll for Compline, the final prayer of the day. The sun has long dipped beneath the hills, and the monastery is cloaked in quiet. You sit by the now cold oven, your robe dusted with flour, your hands still carrying the warmth of loaves long since baked and served. There is no more work to be done, only silence. And yet the smell of the bread lingers. It clings to the air above the hearth, seeps into the fibers of your robe, curls into the wood of the table. The bread you made today will be eaten, digested, forgotten, but its scent, its memory, stays longer than anyone admits. And as you sit in the stillness, you begin to wonder, what happens to the bread once the monks are gone? Bread and the Black Death. In the 14th century, the world changed. Monasteries, once the most stable institutions in medieval Europe, were swept into chaos by plague, war, and economic collapse. The Black Death killed not only peasants and townsfolk, but entire religious communities. Some monasteries lost all but a few brothers. In others, the dead went unburied and the ovens went cold. And with the death of the bakers came the death of the bread. In some ruins, archaeologists have found monastic kitchens abandoned, mid-task loaves left in rising bowls, ovens unlit, flour spilled on the floor. Rats came, then moss, then time. The bread did not rot, it petrified, hardened by centuries, and in some rare cases it remained, a loaf-shaped fossil of devotion. The rise of the lay baker. But the bread itself did not disappear. As monasteries declined, lay bakers, secular men and women trained by monastic orders, began to take over the task. Some worked in manor kitchens. Others sold bread from carts or market stalls. Their loaves were rounder, crustier, and sometimes enriched with butter or eggs. The monastic breads, by comparison, were plainer and denser, often seen as backward or overly austere by the 15th century. Still, some bakeries claim to keep the rule bread baked using traditional monastic techniques. These loaves were sold near cathedrals and pilgrim stops. They were believed to be healthier, even spiritually cleansing. Their scent was familiar, even centuries later. Sour rye, smoky crust, and a hint of ash from wood-fired ovens. Bread in the books. Monastic breads rarely had written recipes. They were passed down by hands and noses, by the feel of the dough and the smell of the starter. But in the late medieval period, some scribes began to record the methods, more as curiosities than cookbooks. In these parchments we find flour of barley, coarse and sifted with the fan. Water drawn before prime, neither cold nor boiling. Yeast from the skin of grapes or from the leavings of ale. Knead in silence, bake upon the hearthstone, break, do not slice. These are not instructions, they are remnants, clues, echoes of a world that measured life by loaves. The monastery as memory. Even after many monasteries fell into disrepair or were dissolved, especially during the Reformation, their bakeries were often the last structures to collapse. Strongly built, often separated from the main complex, they were repurposed. as farmhouses, as stables, as local bakeries, or left standing, their ovens cold but intact. Some villagers would still sneak in to use the ovens. Others swore the stones held the smell of God's bread. Superstition, perhaps, but not without meaning. To them, the scent of baking wasn't just food, it was a whisper of order, of calm, of a time when the world moved slowly and prayers rose with the steam. The echo in modern bread. Today, few loaves are made in silence. Fewer still are made by hand in chill kitchens before dawn, but echoes remain. The sourdough revival of the 21st century brought back something once so common it was invisible. Starters passed from baker to baker, alive with wild yeasts and silent companionship. Wood-fired ovens reappeared in villages and cities, and with them, the scent. Not of supermarkets, but of slow fermentation. Not of uniformity, but of loaves with memory. Not of convenience, but of ritual, patience, and care. In some abbeys, the tradition continues. Monks and nuns still bake bread not for profit but for practice. Their kitchens are quiet. Their hands are steady. Their ovens still smell of rye and ash. You may never taste their bread, but you might one day catch its scent on a breeze in a chapel in the quiet of early morning. And if you do, ask yourself, what are we really hungry for? And what happens when the world forgets how to knead, to wait, to rise again? Story 3, Dust and Ink, the daily life of a scribe in Mesopotamia. You rise before the sun, not by bell or voice, but by the quiet heat of the Mesopotamian dawn pressing against the mat where you sleep. The house is still. The city beyond Uruk is only beginning to stir. You hear a distant bray of donkeys, the soft splash of water being drawn from wells, and the muted shuffling of sandals on hard-packed earth. You are a scribe's apprentice, or rather you are training to become one, a process that may take more than a decade. You will not plow the fields, you will not weave or sell goods, you will write. But before the stylus touches clay, there is dust to sweep, water to carry, and lessons to recite. The house of tablets, the Edubba. You study at the Edubba literally, the house of tablets. It is not a school in the modern sense, but an institution tied to the temple, run by senior scribes and directed by a master who holds authority second only to the priesthood. You carry a reed basket slung over your shoulder. Inside, a small pot of water, several dull clay tablets, and 3 styluses, one sharpened, one blunt, one split at the end for shaping edges. The Edubba smells of wet clay, sun-baked brick, sweat, and rush matting. Dust hangs in the air. The walls are lined with shelf niches packed with tablets, some worn smooth from handling, others fresh with sharp-edged cuneiform wedges. A senior student greets you with a command, sweep the floor. You do so in silence. The dust you lift rises slowly in the morning heat, earth-scented and thick, making your eyes sting. It settles again on the ledges of tablets, the edges of robes, the corners of your tongue. Clay, not paper. There is no ink here, no parchment, no quills, only clay, soft and dense, cut from riverbeds and shaped into rectangles or ovals. You go to the shaping trough. The clay is stored in heavy urns, kept moist with soaked linen cloths. It smells like silt and river rot, a strange but not unpleasant odor like history fermenting. You knead the clay with your hands, forming it into slabs the size of your palm. The consistency must be just right, not too wet, or it will smudge, not too dry, or it will crack. The art is in the feel, not the recipe. Once shaped, you smooth the surface with a flat reed and leave it to firm in the shade for a few moments before writing. Some students prepare a dozen tablets each morning. You are still slow. You prepare 3. Each tablet, even before it bears a word, already holds the weight of memory. The first words, lists and syllables. Your earliest lessons are not stories, they are lists. The master calls out, barley. You write the symbol, a wedge followed by a curving stroke. Goat, another symbol. House, another. Each symbol is made with a series of tiny impressions pressed into the clay with the stylus, not carved. The cuneiform script is built of wedges and angles, shapes that must be practiced until muscle memory takes over. You read aloud as you write she mash e acute. The syllables are ancient, older than memory. The clay smells earthy and hot under your fingers. The stylus, made from reed, leaves faint shavings on the surface. You flick them away. You learn quickly to apply pressure gently so the tablet doesn't buckle. Your fingers are stained gray. Your wrists ache. But the sound of styluses tapping clay, the dry, dull ch becomes its own kind of chant, a language of labor. Scribes and status. Scribes in Mesopotamia are not lowly clerks. They are privileged intermediaries between rulers and records, temples and taxation, gods and men. To become a full scribe is to enter a priestly class, albeit one of numbers and texts. You will one day write laws, contracts, rituals, and tax ledgers. You may compose letters for generals or inscribe the deeds of kings. Your robe is modest, but your future is not. Still, you are reminded daily. Every scribe began as a boy bent over a dust-coated slab, squinting in the sun, unsure whether the wedge was too deep, too crooked, or simply wrong. Even now, mistakes are punished not cruelly, but publicly. A crooked symbol might earn a tap on the knuckles, a corrected tablet tossed back into the softening trough. You watch as a student weeps quietly while reshaping a tablet he thought was finished. Breaks in breath. At midday, the writing stops. The sun is too hot. The air in the adaba becomes stifling bitter with dust, clay, and sweat. Students retreat to shaded corners, nibbling dried figs or chewing salted barley bread. You drink water from a clay jug. It smells slightly of the porous ceramic and the river silt from which it was drawn. There is no idle chatter. You do not speak of family or dreams or fears. You speak of symbols. Why is the sign for sheep curved? Why does the word for star have 3 wedges? What happens if you press too deep? Even rest becomes ritual. The end of the day, but not the lesson. As the sun lowers, you bring your finished tablets to the drying area. Some will be baked in ovens for permanence, especially those with legal records or contracts. Others will be scraped and reused. You place your 3 tablets on a reed mat. The smell of drying clay, now harder and dustier, is different than it was this morning, less alive, more finished, more still. The master walks by, examines your work. He nods once. No praise, just acknowledgement. Tomorrow, you will begin with verbs. And yet as you pack your things, a thought lingers. What if the tablet breaks? What happens to the words when they shatter? The sun is barely up when you return to the adaba. The reed basket swings against your hip, heavier today. Inside are more blank tablets than usual. Today you're copying sentences, not just symbols, verbs, actions, connections. The building blocks of stories, contracts, commands. The morning air in Uruk is dry, but tinged with the smell of livestock and tannins drifting in from nearby workshops. Somewhere, someone is boiling leather. Somewhere else, a priest chants at the temple. But here, inside the scribe school, the world narrows down to clay, stylus, and repetition. Today, you begin to learn how to fix the fleeting in earth. From lists to logic. Scribes were not merely writers, they were architects of order. The city ran because scribes recorded who owed what, who sold what, who worshipped whom. Before kings could rule, their laws had to be written. Before gods could be worshipped, their names had to be recorded. You begin the day copying a common set of phrases. The man brought goats to the temple. The barley was weighed and stored. The king sent word by messenger. Each sentence is deceptively simple, but every mark on the tablet must be deliberate. A missed wedge could change goat into fine or temple into storeroom. You learn the importance of syntax and spacing. Some masters insist on uniformity, each symbol the same size. Others teach flexibility, allowing larger signs for names, smaller ones for action words. But all agree, a scribe's line must be confident, straight, clean. A hesitation shows, a smear ruins a sentence. The grammar of clay. Mesopotamian languages, Sumerian, then later Akkadian, are not soft tongues. They are guttural, consonant-heavy, made for structure, not for song. But in their rigidity lies precision. As you write, your mind begins to see the logic. Verbs always last, determinatives always precede names, numbers come before the item they count. And slowly, you begin to glimpse the magic hidden in these lines. You are learning not just to write, but to think like a scribe. You no longer ask, what does this word mean? You ask, what power does this word hold in this place? The tablet as tool and trap. Today, one of the older students breaks a tablet. He was rushing. The clay was too dry. The stylus pressed too hard. A corner cracks off 3 lines of cuneiform lost. He tries to repair it by smoothing the edge and rewriting, but it's clear the tablet will not hold. You watch silently. All scribes are trained to expect failure. Clay is forgiving, but only once. If broken after drying, it must be ground back into silt and rekneaded. And yet some fragments are kept, stored, filed. Why? Because even broken, a tablet carries truth. A record once made, even partially lost, is still part of the story. You learn an early lesson, the fragility of memory. Words last longer than breath, but not longer than time. Tablets for the gods. In the afternoon, you are given a special task. The temple priests have dictated a short offering list. Goods donated during a lunar festival. It must be copied onto a tablet of purity, a fresh slab, formed today, from clay drawn from the temple pool. You handle it with reverence. This clay is different, lighter, smoother, perfumed faintly with cedar oil, perhaps from where the storage jug stood nearby. It is meant to be permanent, baked and stored in the temple archives. You copy 3 measures of barley, 2 white doves, 1 jug of date wine, 1 linen robe for the statue. Each item receives its own line, each symbol its proper place. You do not rush. Behind you, a priest murmurs softly, not quite supervising, not quite praying. When it is done, the tablet is lifted carefully onto a wooden board. It will dry overnight. If it cracks, it must be redone. You realize with a slow chill that your mistakes may offend a god. Beyond the walls, writing the world. Not all scribes stay in the Adaba. Some go on to become royal scribes, following armies, writing treaties, or documenting conquests. Others remain in cities, composing legal contracts, boundary disputes, or commercial receipts. Some even become poets, transcribing epics from memory into clay, form the Epic of Gilgamesh, the lamentations for lost cities, prayers to Inanna. You have heard whispers of one such master scribe, Lugaltsaji, who wrote for kings and temples alike. His work was said to be so precise that even enemy cities kept his tablets. You wonder if you one day might do the same. But for now you write only records, barley, fish, bricks, goats. And yet even these carry their own quiet poetry. The smell of knowledge. By late afternoon the Adaba is stifling. The combined smell of dry clay, sweat, warm brick, and reed fibers is thick in your nose. The air hums with dust motes. Your fingertips are pruned from clay handling. But as you set your final tablet down to dry, you feel pride, not excitement, but a calm sense of place. You are part of something old, older than empires. You are not a soldier. You do not build walls, but your marks will remain long after both have fallen. Still you wonder, what if the words are never read? What if the people forget how to understand the signs? Evening falls across Uruk, casting long golden shadows against the mud brick walls of the city. The The temperature drops quickly now, and the air carries a trace of the Euphrates, a mix of moisture, fish, and distant marsh reeds. You leave the Adaba slowly, your hands dusty, your stylus tucked behind your ear. The city around you pulses with quiet motion. A goat cart rattles past. Women call to children from shaded doorways. The scent of lentils cooking over clay stoves rises into the twilight. You do not head straight home. Instead, you walk toward the temple archives, a place most citizens never see. You are allowed only because you carry a tablet requested by the temple priests. In your arms is a record of offerings: barley, lambs, incense, and wine. Nothing dramatic, nothing royal, just the daily hum of a city that never stops needing to be remembered. The temple archives. You enter through a low doorway, the room inside cool and dim, built of thick brick to protect its contents from sun and rain. The air here is dense, chalky, with the smell of dry clay and decaying reed mats. The archives are not a single library. They are hundreds of cubbies carved into the walls, filled with tablets. Some are only weeks old. Others are centuries old, the clay darkened by time, their symbols still legible, sharp, and deliberate. You feel reverence. These tablets were written by scribes like you, some better, some worse. Some with a steady hand, others clumsier, but all were preserved. Because this was Mesopotamia's greatest achievement. Not its ziggurats or kings, but its ability to remember itself. The tablet that changed nothing. A priest hands you a worn tablet, one that must be recopied. It's cracked. The script has faded slightly, but the message is clear. An agreement for the rental of oxen between two farmers, dated the 12th day of the month of Nisanu, in the 6th year of the reign of Rim-Sin. It's over 100 years old. The agreement itself is unremarkable. Oxen were loaned, a debt was repaid, the terms were fulfilled, nothing went wrong. And yet this tablet, preserved so carefully, reminds you that not all history is about war or greatness. Some history is made of quiet cooperation, of men shaking hands, of debts honored, of grain delivered. You copy it slowly, respectfully, word for word. This is your task, to keep the mundane alive. The destruction that preserves. Scribes know something strange. Fire is the enemy of paper, but the friend of clay. Many tablets once dried are still fragile. They can be crushed, soaked, eroded. But if accidentally caught in a fire, say during a city siege, they harden permanently. This is why we know so much about Mesopotamia. Cities like Nineveh, Nippur, and Babylon, when destroyed by war or disaster, left behind thousands of baked, fossilized tablets. In the ashes of temples, archaeologists have found shelves toppled, tablets shattered but the fragments still readable, the cuneiform impressions preserved like footprints in stone. You think of this as you pass the temple furnace, where rejected tablets are sometimes burned for brick glaze. You inhale the acrid smoke of scorched clay and wonder, will someone read your words 1,000 years from now, not because they were valued, but because they survived a disaster? The limits of the stylus. There are things you cannot write. Emotions, for instance. There is no cuneiform for grief, only for weeping or loss. No word for hope, only for expectation. You can't write dream, only sleep vision. This is the boundary of your power. You can record that something happened, but not how it felt. You can write, the king offered silver to the gods. But you cannot write, he did so with trembling hands. And so, what survives of you will always be flattened, practical, factual. The poetry of daily life, the smell of river clay, the soreness in your wrist, the thrill of writing your first complete sentence, none of it will survive in the wedge marks. Unless, perhaps, in the quiet rhythm of your lines, another scribe long from now might sense it. The whisper of a name. Before you leave the archives, you press your name, Lugal Tarzu, your scribal title, into the corner of a fresh tablet. It is small, discreet, but it matters. You are not a king. You are not a god, but you are a witness. And even if the rest of the tablet crumbles away, even if the contract it holds is long forgotten, your name might remain. And in that name is proof. You lived, you remembered, you wrote. A scent that echoes. Outside the archive, the evening air is cooler now. The streets are nearly empty. You tuck your stylus back into your basket. Clay dust clings to your robe, your nails, your breath. There is no ink to wash off, no parchment to crumple. Only the scent of earth. The quiet hush of a stylus withdrawn. And the knowledge that your words now rest inside stone. Still you wonder. What happens when the last reader forgets how to read the wedges? What if the words outlive their meaning? Story 4. How the streets of Edo were swept at dawn. The bell of the Jakamachi, the castle town, has not yet rung when you rise from your thin sleeping mat. The air in your narrow room is still, cool with the lingering touch of night. You dress quietly in layered cotton, tie your tenugui cloth around your head, and step outside. The sky is beginning to pale, but the city still sleeps. Shops are shuttered. The lamps along the main streets flicker their last oil, but you are not the only one awake. Across the narrow road, another figure emerges from a side alley, broom in hand. Then another, and another. You nod silently at each other. This is Edo, the beating heart of Tokugawa, Japan. Home to more than 1 million people, the largest city in the world. And every morning, long before merchants shout and palanquins rattle, the city is swept clean by those whose names history rarely records. You are one of them. A town sweeper, a member of the urban cleaning crews whose labor ensured the great metropolis of Edo did not collapse under its own filth. A city of paper and dust. Edo was built with astonishing speed: wood, bamboo, straw, and paper. Entire districts could rise in weeks and burn in hours. The streets were narrow, densely packed, and bustling. They were also, without intervention, incredibly vulnerable to rot, fire, and disease. But they weren't dirty. Unlike many cities in Europe or Asia at the time, Edo was known for its cleanliness, thanks in large part to the work done by thousands of anonymous laborers who swept, hauled, rinsed, and burned. You sweep not out of pride, but out of duty enforced by city ordinance, monitored by neighborhood heads, and sustained by long tradition. The scent of the street at this hour is unique. Wet dirt, ashes, fish scales, horse manure, old miso soup, roasted tea. It's not unpleasant, it's just real. You recognize each scent and where it came from. A sake shop that dumped its lees too early. A soba stall that forgot to rinse the street. A fishmonger who scrubbed too late. You sweep it all, gently, repetitively, quietly. The tools of the trade. Your broom is made of stiff twigs, bound with rice straw and rope. It wears down quickly, and you often replace the head every few weeks. It makes a distinctive sound, a soft scratch against dirt and stone. You also carry a dustpan woven from reeds, a bucket, and sometimes a long pole to hook trash from gutters. Most importantly, you carry a knowledge of flow. The wind, the slope of the alleys, the timing of shop deliveries, these shape how the city's dirt moves. You learn to sweep with, not against, the invisible tide of human motion. You also learn to identify dangerous trash. Bits of broken ceramic that could cut sandals. Oiled paper that might catch fire. Rat droppings, signaling an infestation. Some sweepers carry small pouches of charcoal, ash, or vinegar, which they scatter over suspicious fluid to neutralize odor and reduce flies. The work is not glamorous, but it is skillful, generational. There are sweepers who have worked the same alley for 20 years and can tell you how the soil changed after a single night of rain. Cleanliness and law. The Tokugawa shogunate was obsessively concerned with order, and cleanliness was a reflection of civic virtue. Regulations required that all shopkeepers sweep their storefronts before opening. Tenants maintain the gutters in front of their homes. Waste be sorted and placed in designated bins by sunrise. Failure to do so could lead to public shamming, fines, or even loss of residence in the ward. But while every citizen was expected to help, it was the organized sweepers paid a meager stipend by town officials or hired privately by merchant guilds who held the city together. You are one of these. You are not praised, you are not honored, but when you do your job well, you disappear, and that is the point. The rhythm of the sweep. You work from just before dawn until the bell rings the beginning of the market day. You sweep in patterns, first the center of the street, then the sides, then the gutter. You flick water from a ladle to keep the dust down. You drag trash into piles, then transfer it to your reed pan. Occasionally, someone passes, an early rising monk, a constable, a weary courier, and nods in acknowledgement. They walk on clean stone because of you, but they do not speak. The sweep has a rhythm like a prayer. Scratch, pause, step, scratch again. You are not thinking exactly. You are listening to the quiet, to the wind, to the subtle messages the city leaves behind in dirt and crumbs. The smell of fire. In winter, every house and stall burns charcoal or wood. The ash settles in gutters, dark and fine. If left too long, it clogs drains and stains sandals. You recognize the different kinds of smoke by scent. Pine burns fast and hot. The ash is flaky pale. Oak smolders slowly. The ash is dark and heavy. Charcoal leaves a faint sweetness. Straw smells acrid. You sweep ash carefully. Never raise dust. Always scoop low with the wind behind you. Some mornings, you catch a whiff of something else, singed lacquer, or the burnt silk of a kimono hem, signs of a fire that was too close. You remember the great fire from 3 years ago. Half your district vanished in an afternoon. You swept the ashes for weeks. Some streets were never rebuilt, but you kept sweeping them anyway, as if your broom might call the homes back. The silence before the noise. By the time the city begins to wake, store shutters creaking open, tea kettles hissing on charcoal stoves, you are nearly done. The street now smells of rice steaming, of dashi stock, of fresh ink being ground for shop signs. You gather the last of your sweepings into a cart that will be hauled away to the river. Some waste will be burned, some composted, some thrown into the eddies beyond the canals. You do not ask what happens to it after that. You just know that tomorrow it will be here again. You lean on your broom for a moment. The sky has turned pink, then orange. Crows call from the temple roof. You exhale. But you wonder, as you always do, what would happen if no one came tomorrow with a broom? Would the city rot in silence, or remember the hands that once kept it clean? The sun is higher now, and you have moved to the merchant quarter. Your path today is a long one down the stone-paved main street, where the sakaya shops open early to offload barrels of rice wine, past the incense sellers whose deliveries reek of sandalwood and smoke, and around the bend where the city's night soil collectors finish their routes with quiet efficiency. You know this path well, not just the layout of the streets, but the way it changes by season, by wind, by foot traffic. Your broom doesn't just sweep, it listens. You are not alone. Edo is swept each day by a network of men and women, some hired by the Machibugyo city magistrates, others by merchant guilds, temple stewards, or even wealthy households. Some sweep alone, others in pairs. Many, like you, do so without being noticed at all. You do not mind. The work is yours, and the city, though it never speaks, remembers you in its own way. The sound of authority. Near the town office, a group of samurai pass by, walking briskly. Their footsteps are clipped, their expressions unreadable. You step aside, lowering your eyes. One glances at your broom but says nothing. The shogunate is not concerned with sweepers unless the streets go dirty. Then, discipline is swift. City codes from the Edo Machihiki decree that cleanliness is an extension of order, and that filth is a sign of disobedience or decay. And so the brooms continue. Public punishments for trash left too long are rare, but not unheard of. A fishmonger once left shrimp shells to rot in a side gutter. He was lashed in the public square and banned from trade for a year. The scent of that street lingered long after the shells were gone. You remember it vividly. Mapping without ink. Though you do not write, you carry a map in your memory, a detailed mental record of every twist and turn in your route. Where the gutter stones shift after heavy rain. Which drain backs up when leaves fall. Where rats scratch beneath the boards. Which alley always smells faintly of fermented beans. You know the broom rhythm for each. Long strokes for the straight path, short flicks for corners, wide sweeps beneath the eaves. And with each day the map deepens, not in width but in texture. This alley smells different today, more sour. A shopkeeper may be ill. That gutter is dry, too dry. A blockage, perhaps, or a neighbor not pouring rinse water as usual. You mark it in your head, adjust your broom. You are not guessing, you are reading the street. Fire watchers and street sweepers. Fire is the great terror of Edo. The city has burned dozens of times. Each district has its own fire watchers, men who climb tall wooden towers and ring bells at the first sign of smoke. But the street sweepers are often the first to see it. A scorched floor mat, the scent of burnt rice left overnight, charcoal spilled too close to paper screens. You report these signs when you see them quietly to the Tanari Gyumi neighborhood watch group. You do not want attention, but you do want to keep the city whole. Some sweepers carry small pots of water, kept cool by river stones, to extinguish stray embers or rinse down suspicious spots. You do not think of this as heroic, just necessary. The smell of seasons. Edo smells different every few weeks. In spring, plum blossoms fall onto the gutters, turning sour beneath the sun. In summer, rainwater pools and the odor of damp tatami and mold rises from shop basements. Autumn brings burning leaves and grilled eel. Winter is dry smoke, rice husks, and the musty scent of futons never aired. You sweep them all. You know which streets catch leaves and where snow lingers in patches. You even know which alley smells best after rain, the one near the calligrapher's shop, where the ink dries slow and earthy. The broom becomes a seasonal instrument, just like the tea kettle, the fan, or the rice mortar. You measure time not by calendars, but by what the streets leave behind. Clean streets, clean hearts. The shogunate promotes a simple idea. Clean streets reflect clean hearts. You hear it repeated by magistrates, by monks, even by entertainers who perform street sermons dressed as wandering holy men. But you know the truth is more practical. Clean streets mean fewer rats, less fire, easier patrols for the samurai, better sales for merchants, healthier air for the people, and perhaps, yes, a sense of dignity, even for the poorest who share the space. You are not cleaning to be seen. You are cleaning so that no one notices anything at all. The absence of mess is its own quiet triumph. The last sweep. You return to your starting point as the street fills with life. Peddlers shout, children run with fans, a drum echoes from a kabuki rehearsal house nearby. You lean your broom against the wall and wipe your brow with your sleeve. A child walks past and glances at the path you just swept. She skips once, twice, then turns and looks back not at you, but at the broom. Then she disappears into the market crowd. You don't move. You think, will she remember this moment, the clean path under her feet, the absence of ash, the soft scent of oiled wood when she grows old? Or will she forget entirely, as the world always forgets those who clear the way? Evening has come. Your broom rests in its corner, the bristles still coated in dust, bits of straw clinging to the frayed end. You sit on a low stool outside your home, a cup of lukewarm tea in your hands. The air carries the scent of cooling stones, sweet soy, and the smoke of hundreds of cooking fires rising above the rooftops of Edo. The city has transformed again. Where silence once ruled, there is now rhythm, laughter, chatter, footsteps, dogs barking in the distance, the last clatter of shop shutters closing. You are no longer sweeping, but you are still watching. The unseen work. There is no monument to the street sweeper in Edo. No statue, no shrine. Just worn sandals, calloused hands, and a city that never quite remembers who made it passable. But your absence would be felt immediately. If you fell ill, if you did not sweep for just one day, the gutters would fill, the waste would collect, and the smell, faint at first, would rise like a whisper of disorder. That is your legacy, to be missed only when gone. You've seen it happen. Years ago in a nearby district, a sweeper was dismissed without replacement. Within 2 weeks, the alley grew slippery with refuse. Someone fell. A shopkeeper blamed the filth. There was a fire, not serious, but enough. The sweeper was quietly reinstated, and no one spoke of it again. This is how the city remembers, not with words but with need. The fires that came anyway. You were there during the Great Fire of Meriki 1657, 3 days and nights, hundreds of thousands displaced, more than half the city burned, the sky turned red, the river filled with ash, temples collapsed, entire neighborhoods disappeared. You swept ash for weeks after. It clung to everything: roofs, gates, sandals, your skin. There were no colors in Edo then, only gray and silence. The air smelled of charcoal and salt tears. And yet the city rebuilt. New houses rose, shops reopened, brooms moved across stones again. The streets could not forget the fire, but they could forgive it with time and effort. You helped rebuild that memory, one sweep at a time. Passing the broom. Now you grow older. The broom feels heavier than it once did. The dust settles deeper in your lungs, but you still rise before the sun, still walk the familiar path, still know which stones wobble when stepped on. You've trained a younger boy, a quiet one, serious with good eyes. He holds the broom properly. He doesn't sweep too fast. He listens to the wind. He's learning. One day he will take your route. You will become a name on a broom handle, perhaps not even that. But if the streets stay clean, you will remain in the space between the footstep and the dust. The broom as memory. A broom wears down slowly, first the bristles, then the shaft cracks slightly from years of pressure, the rope frays. But a good broom, like a well-built bridge or a finely carved comb, holds a memory of the hand that used it. You pass yours on, with a word, a nod, and nothing more. No thanks are needed, only a sweep done right. The street after you. When you are gone tomorrow, a year from now, 10 years at most, the street will still be here. Someone will rise before dawn. Someone will pick up the broom. The stones will still smell faintly of last night's fire. The gutters will collect their nightly offerings, and the rhythm will begin again. Scratch, pause, step, scratch again. No one will say your name, but someone one day may wonder. Who kept these streets so clean? Who swept away the years so carefully? No one even noticed they had passed. And that will be enough. Story 5. The lost trade routes of the Baltic amber merchants. Before gold, before silk, before even salt, there was amber. You stand near the shore of the Baltic Sea, on a morning so cold the wind cuts through your wool tunic like a knife. The sky is thick with fog. The water laps lazily against stones, and above you, gulls cry with the flat disinterest of creatures who have seen too much. You are a merchant's apprentice, perhaps in the 3rd or 2nd century BCE. Your master sleeps in a canvas tent, snoring beneath a fur cloak, but you are awake searching the beach for the golden stone. You scan the shoreline where driftwood tangles with kelp and bones, and then you see it. Not much larger than your thumb, translucent, golden, smoother than glass, and warm even in the frost, a piece of amber. You hold it up to the gray light, and see the trapped shadow of an insect, its wings still visible, its shape suspended in time. This is no ordinary pebble. This is currency, status, amulet, and mystery, a piece of hardened sunlight, carried across mountains and rivers to places where no sea ever touched the shore. And so begins your journey, not through armies or conquest, but through routes now forgotten, walked by men and women who traded the world's first luxury, long before anyone knew its name. The shore people. You do not call yourself Baltic or European. Those are later ideas. You belong to the Eastii, or perhaps to a nameless fishing tribe that survives on salted herring and driftwood fires. You do not write. Your ancestors carved totems, buried the dead in log coffins, and kept time with stars and tides. But even without cities or kings, your people have known for generations that the sea gives up amber. The beach you scour each morning is littered not with trash, but with the detritus of old gods. Strange stones, sea-polished bones, and lumps of tree resin aged by thousands of years beneath the sea floor. You do not understand how it forms, but you know its signs. It is lighter than stone. It floats in salt water. When rubbed with cloth, it draws feathers to it. When burned, it smells like pine and honey. These properties are not science. They are portents. Amber is called the teardrops of the sun, and it is believed to protect against sickness, evil spirits, and death itself. It is not rare here, but far away in places whose names you cannot pronounce, it is worth more than silver. The trade begins. Your master once told you. Amber walks south, always south, as far as Rome, as far as the deserts. You didn't believe him until the first caravan arrived. The men spoke a harsh tongue, wore heavy bronze clasps, and brought salt cakes, beads, and knives to exchange. They left with baskets of amber wrapped in oiled cloth. In later months, others came. They followed no roads, there were none, but passed from river to river, camp to camp, bartering stories as they went. These were the first amber merchants, the silent couriers of a trade route now buried beneath forest and soil, stretching from Jutland to the Adriatic, from Lithuania to the Alps. The forest path. You walk one of these paths now. It is no more than a foot trail winding through dense pine forest. The air smells of moss, sap, and rot. Every few hours you pass a marker, a split log, a stack of stones, or the charred remains of a fire pit. You travel light. A pack of amber stones, carefully wrapped. A flint knife. Dried fish. A fur cloak that is already too damp. A carved token of a bear spirit tied around your neck. You are not a soldier, but this journey is dangerous. There are tribes who do not trade, who see all strangers as threats. There are wolves, bandits, and snowfalls that bury paths without warning. But the merchants are persistent, for the South pays well. Through other hands. You stop in a village where the people speak a language full of clicking sounds. They live in thatched houses, raise pigs, and wear bronze spirals in their ears. They know what you carry. They have seen amber before, but they do not use it themselves. Still, they trade you grain, salt, and a copper bracelet. They will pass the amber on to someone else just as you did. This is how the trade survives. No one travels the full route, but the stone keeps moving. From hand to hand. From forest to pasture. From marsh to mountain. Each trader knows only the path ahead, or behind, not the whole. The smell of the southern markets. You have not reached it, but you've heard of it. Aquileia, the Roman port at the edge of the Alps. A place of stone buildings, aqueducts, and strange men who wear robes and write on wax. There amber is carved into. Signet rings for senators. Teething beads for noble infants. Idols of foreign gods. And funeral offerings to light the path of the dead. The Romans believe amber protects the soul. Some burn it as incense. Others grind it into powder and mix it with wine to cure sickness. They call it electrum. You have never seen Aquileia, you may never see it. But the amber you hold now, nestled in your pack, will go there. It may outlive you. The city that never knew your name. No record will speak of you. The Romans will not carve your face into stone or mention your tribe in their letters. Archaeologists will never know your path or what language you spoke. But they will find your stones tumbled from graves, dropped in rivers, buried in amphorae. They will study the insects trapped inside, the microscopic scratches left by ancient knives. They will know the chemical fingerprint of the Baltic Sea. And in doing so, they will know that you passed this way, without ever knowing your name. A pause before the next camp. You reach a clearing near a frozen creek. The sun has set. You build a fire from damp pine twigs. The smoke rises in a lazy spiral. You unwrap the amber pouch, not to trade, but to look. Each stone is different, some rough, some smooth, one almost red. You hold one up and whisper, "Where will you go when I no longer carry you? Who will wear you, burn you, bury you, or forget you?" You don't expect an answer, but you keep walking. The journey southward is not a single road, but a chain of forgotten paths, each one worn into the land by centuries of footfalls. There are no maps, only memory, your master's stories, the warnings of traders around shared fires, the subtle signs left by others. A carved mark on a tree, the angle of a stone cairn, the ash circle from a fire pit long cooled. You are still weeks from any true settlement, but your cargo is growing lighter, stone by stone. Amber is a strange companion, a thing of beauty that buys bread and safety, but also invites envy and theft. You travel not for glory, but because someone must move the stone. Someone always has. Between tribes, each region you pass through has its own people, their own ways. In the marshes near the Vistula River, the villagers wear boar tusk necklaces and accept amber in exchange for honey and dried apples. In the Carpathian foothills, the people live in log huts and paint their faces before speaking with strangers. They take only raw amber uncarved and prefer egg-shaped stones for reasons they do not explain. You learn to trade not just objects but gestures, a bowed head, an open palm, a slow, deliberate step forward. You never speak your full name, you never tell them where you're going. Each stop is a lesson in survival. Each fire you light carries the scent of a different forest, wet moss, oak bark, smoke heavy with pine resin. You sleep light, you eat little, you listen. Carvings and stories. When you reach a trading outpost tucked between limestone cliffs, you meet another merchant, a potter from the south. He wears a silver band on his wrist and speaks a form of Greek, though broken. He sees the amber stones in your pouch and raises his brows. "How far?" he asks. You don't answer, but you hand him a peace oval, honey-colored, no inclusions. He examines it, then gestures to a leather pouch at his side. From it, he withdraws a carved idol, a small figure of a woman with no face, made entirely from amber. He places it in your hand. It is warm and heavier than you expect. The smell is faintly sweet. He says haltingly, "Thracians say she is the goddess of sleep. Give her to a child, they do not die." You hold the idol carefully, then return it. The potter nods, satisfied. You trade a few rough stones for iron arrowheads. As he leaves, he turns and says, "You carry sunlight. Be careful, it draws shadows." You do not know exactly what he means. But that night, when the wind howls through the pass and wolves cry far off, you keep your hand on your pouch. Over the mountains, crossing the Alps is the hardest part. You join a caravan of traders heading to Aquileia, men with mules, slabs of salt, dried fruit, and pots wrapped in straw. They let you travel with them because you carry goods. No one travels alone in the mountains. The air grows thin. Snow lines the narrow paths. The rocks shift beneath your feet. One man slips and breaks his leg. He is left behind, wrapped in a cloak with a fire and a skin of water. He says nothing. You sleep in caves. The fire never goes out. The smoke lingers on your skin, in your clothes, in your breath. You do not speak unless necessary. All eyes watch the ridges above. Bandits are as common as avalanches. At night you turn over one of your amber pieces, feeling its smoothness against your thumb. One side is rough, unpolished. You like it better that way. The southern side. When the mountains release you, the world changes. The trees are different. The air smells of olive wood, dust, and flowers you cannot name. The roads are better. The people walk upright, unafraid. They speak Latin. The buildings are made of stone. You have reached the Roman frontier. Here, amber is known, even expected. Roman traders examine your pieces with professional detachment. They do not marvel, but they do pay, sometimes in coins, sometimes in goods, sometimes in letters of safe passage. You trade half your supply for a bronze pin, salted olives, soap, a strip of dyed cloth from Gaul, a small silver coin marked with a bearded-faced Jupiter, perhaps. And still, you carry the best stones with you, the ones with insects trapped inside, the pieces that seem to glow even in shade. You want to see them reach their end. The markets of Aquileia. You enter the city on a late morning. It smells of bread, garlic, animal dung, and perfumed oil. Stalls line the roads, hawking wine, fish sauce, cloth, tools, amulets. At a booth near the Forum, you meet a man in a linen toga who gestures to your pouch. You show him your finest piece, a large, perfectly clear oval with a winged ant inside. He calls it succinum and offers you 3 Roman denarii. You don't understand the words, but you understand the exchange. You leave the market with fewer stones, but a full pouch, not of value, but of history. You think of the shoreline, the cold Baltic wind, the first fire, the first trade. And now the stone is here. You were the bridge. The path reversed. You begin the journey north again. Lighter, slower. You know the route now. You know the faces, the dangers, the places to sleep, the places to avoid. But something has changed. The amber is gone, and you feel its absence, as though something once alive has been buried. You wonder, will these roads remember your footsteps? Will the mountains remember the stone you carried? The journey home is slower. Not because your pack is lighter, though it is, but because you carry something different now. Not amber, not goods, not wealth. You carry the memory of the path. And the strange truth about the amber trade is that once you have made the journey, once you have seen the trail from coast to mountain to city and back, you begin to understand something deeper. You were never just moving stones. You were part of the story the stones themselves carried. The old roots fade. Years pass, seasons change, empires shift. You walk the route again and again, older now, wiser, a little slower with each crossing. But you begin to notice things. A village you once stopped in is burned and empty. A shrine has collapsed into moss. A river you once forded has changed course, swallowing part of the path. Other merchants speak of new roads, easier and faster, paved by the Romans, patrolled by soldiers, mapped by engineers. The old trail through the forest becomes overgrown. The cave where you once slept collapses in a storm. Your carved waymark on the pine tree is lost under bark. The amber still moves, but the route you learned in silence and hardship fades. No one remembers the cold shoreline. No one remembers the boy with the reed-woven pouch. Except the stones. The stones in the ground. Some of your amber never reaches its end. A bag is dropped in a river. Another is buried with a friend. One piece your favorite, the one with the ant inside, you give to a healer near the Danube. She wears it on a string around her neck, says it keeps her thoughts clear. Years later, when she dies, it is placed in her grave. That stone will be found again one day. by someone digging a well, by a farmer turning soil, by an archaeologist brushing away centuries of dust. They will lift it up, hold it to the light, and marvel at the creature trapped inside. They will ask, where did this come from? Who first touched it? How did it get here? And they will never know the answer. Amber in the temples. One of your last trades is to a Roman priest. You bring him a polished stone large as an egg clear, flawless. He holds it to the flame and smiles. The gods sleep in this, he says. He places it on an altar near a small statue of Apollo. Later, the amber will be wrapped in cloth and sealed in a vault beneath the temple. It will stay there long after the temple burns, long after the priest dies, long after the gods themselves are forgotten. And when the temple crumbles, when the roof caves in, when earth and moss bury everything, the amber remains untouched, unburned, unbroken. Because amber does not rot. A merchant grows old. Your legs are not as steady, your pack lighter still. You trade less now, only small pieces, the rest you keep. You become a guide for younger merchants. You tell them stories, most do not believe them. Amber doesn't float, they say. Amber comes from the south, they insist. Those old paths are useless. You do not argue. You walk a little each day, not to sell but to remember. You know where the streams once changed, where the stones rise underfoot. You can smell a path even if it has not been walked in a decade. Your feet remember, your bones remember. One day, you leave your last pouch by a riverbank and walk away. What the stone remembers. Centuries pass. The Roman Empire falls. The cities change, the temples collapse. The names of the gods are replaced with others. Maps are redrawn, roads vanish. But amber continues. It is found in Viking burials. It is traded again in the Middle Ages. It decorates the hilts of swords, the hems of gowns, the walls of palaces. It is burned as incense, ground into medicine, carved into trinkets for tourists. No one remembers the trail, but the amber does. Each piece holds the salt of the northern sea, the ash from a pinewood fire in a snowy pass, the scent of oil on Roman fingers, the silence of a forgotten forest, and perhaps somewhere, deep within its honey-colored heart, the breath of the first hands that ever picked it up. Story 6. A day beneath the pyramids, the builders who never saw the sky. The sun rises slowly over the Giza plateau, but you do not see it. You are already deep underground. You are a tomb worker, a stone hauler, a sand-coated, muscle-bound part of a machine older than the gods. You were not born into glory. You were born into labor. And your world, your real world, is not the gleaming white limestone face of the pyramid, but the dark tunnels, the ramp chambers, the shaft rooms, and the underground caverns that form the veins of these tombs. You live in dust, in heat, in the scrape of stone on stone, the creak of rope, the crack of a foreman's whip. Your ears are filled with the sounds of the living, breathing, grunting, shuffling, shouting. The pyramid gleams high above, a divine structure, but you are one of the men who never looks up. You are beneath the pyramid. The breath of stone. It is still morning, but the chamber is already thick with sweat and the smell of limestone dust. A faint mist clings to the walls, sweat evaporated, trapped, returned as condensation. You carry a chisel, hammer, and a reed torch dipped in animal fat. The torch sputters faintly, barely illuminating the dark corridor ahead. The passage is just high enough for you to stoop. You know every jagged seam in the rock, every place where the ceiling dips low, where the floor turns slick from years of boots and bare feet. Here, deep beneath the surface, you are digging not for treasure but for precision. This shaft must align with the king's chamber. This wall must angle precisely 26 degrees. This step must be cut deep enough to fit the granite block that arrives tomorrow. You do not know what these angles mean, but the priests care, And so do the architects, who walk the tunnels muttering numbers and tracing lines in red ochre. You only know that your arm aches after the first 100 strikes, and still, there are thousands to go. What the builders eat. At midday you pause. Food comes down from the surface in baskets lowered by rope. Bread made from barley, coarse and still warm. Onions. A handful of dried dates. A water jug shared between 5 men. Occasionally, if you've been working on royal chambers, a wedge of goat cheese. You eat quickly, you speak little. You are not a slave, not exactly. You are paid in food and beer, sometimes in copper trinkets. You have a family in the workers' village not far from the pyramid base, a mud brick home, a wife, perhaps a child. But your hours belong to the stone. The village you rarely see. When you emerge at dusk, the light stabs your eyes. You live with others, artisans, quarrymen, haulers, masons, and stone polishers. Your village is dusty but organized. You have a cookhouse, a communal water trough, even a scribe who records deliveries and deaths. Your neighbors build walls for the dead, but they live like the barely living. You hear whispers of illness workers coughing blood, bones crushed by stone rollers, men who collapsed in the heat and never rose again. Still, new workers arrive, new hands take up the rope. The pyramid is not paused. Why you work? No one told you why the pharaoh needs a pyramid. But you've heard the priests speak of eternity. You've heard the legends that if the king's tomb is built just right, he will become one with the sun, rise again, and watch over the land forever. And in some strange way, that idea gives meaning to the pain in your hands, the cuts on your arms, the blackened nails. You are not building a tomb. You are building forever, even if you are buried in sand before the king is. The glyphs you do not read. Sometimes you pass walls covered in hieroglyphs. Colorful, ordered, carefully painted by temple artists with brushes made from reeds and palm fiber. You do not read, but you know what some of the symbols mean. A feather equals truth. A falcon equals the god Horus. A man with a crown equals the king. A beetle equals rebirth. You wonder, will your name ever be written? Unlikely. You are not a scribe, nor a priest, nor royal. But still, you carve stone that will be seen by the dead. You dig shafts that will never be entered again. Your silence becomes architecture. The crack in the tunnel. On this day, a new sound echoes through the tunnel. A crack not loud but sharp, followed by a groan of stone. Then a hiss of dust. You freeze, others do too. Torches lift, eyes widen. One of the ceiling slabs has shifted. You feel a rush of air, a warning from the earth itself. Then the foreman shouts. You all retreat slowly, carefully. The tunnel is inspected. The architects arrive. Measurements are taken. The shaft will hold. But your heart continues to race for hours. Night without stars. By night, in your cramped sleeping corner, you dream of collapse. You dream of being buried beneath the stone, your last breath trapped between the echo of your chisel and the dust of forgotten kings. You turn on your mat, eyes open, staring at the thatched ceiling. And you wonder, will anyone ever know I was here? Not the pharaoh, not the priests, not the gods, just the walls, just the stone. Morning arrives again, with the sound of leather slapping stone. Your eyes open before the sun crests the desert horizon. There is no alarm, only routine. You rise because you must, because the pyramid waits, because the overseer will come and he does not forgive delay. A deep breath, a swig of tepid water, a bite of barley bread. And then the long descent. You return to the tunnels beneath the pharaoh's resting place. Torchlight flickers on the limestone walls, revealing the ghosts of pick marks, countless and overlapping like sand ripples frozen in time. You take your place among them. The Stone Whisperers. Today, your task is fine chisel work, flattening a sloped wall in one of the interior corridors. Your hammer taps in rhythm. Tap, 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 breathe. Tap, 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 rest. The foreman watches, marking your pace on a tally stick. Your hands are strong but ache now in ways that no salve soothes. You've developed knots in your shoulders and a persistent pain behind your ribs that tightens when you twist. You've seen what happens to older workers, their spines bent, their coughs constant. The dust is worst in these narrow corridors. It clings to your tongue, your skin, your lungs. It lives in you now. Some say it's sacred dust touched by the hand of Pharaoh. Others say it's just the slow rot of men turned into stone themselves. The ones who draw. At midday, while others eat, you sneak a look at the artisans. They're painting a ceremonial wall figures of the gods, jackal-headed Anubis, ibis-faced Thoth, the river of stars in the night sky, a golden boat ferrying the pharaoh's spirit into the afterlife. You don't know the names of the artists, but you admire their calm hands and clean robes. They draw with ochre, lapis, malachite. You saw one of them mix color from crushed rock and egg whites. Their hands are smooth, unscarred. You envy them. But you also know, when the tomb is sealed, their paint will fade. Your stone will remain. Between walls and gods. This corridor is part of the burial chamber complex. Everything here must be precise. The measurements are checked daily. The stone blocks must fit without mortar. You've seen the architects lower thin copper wires against the walls, eyes narrowing at the smallest tilt. The pharaoh's Ka, his life force, will pass through here, they say. If a passage is crooked, his spirit might become lost. And so you strike carefully. One error, and the gods might take it personally. You do not believe in every god, but you believe in the pyramid, and you believe in stone. A man from the Delta. In the afternoon, a new worker arrives, a replacement for one who fell ill. He is from the Delta, he says, wears a necklace of beads, smells of marsh water and smoked fish. He is leaner than most, with fingers like reeds. He has never worked in stone before. You show him how to grip the chisel, where to swing, when to rest. He learns quickly, but he asks too many questions. Why are the stones so big? Why must we smooth the chamber no one will ever see? Why not use smaller tunnels? You shrug, the answer is the same. Because the pharaoh commanded it. That night, you hear him whispering to another worker. The gods do not build, we do. You say nothing, but the foreman hears. The next day, the man from the Delta is gone. The shrine in the wall. In a recess near the worksite, tucked behind a stack of unused limestone blocks, you discover a small clay figure. It's a shabti, a funerary servant, placed in tombs to work in the afterlife on behalf of the dead. This one is unfinished. Its face is blank. Someone carved a name into its base, but it's smudged and unreadable. It wasn't placed by priests, you know that. One of the workers made this. Maybe someone like you, hopping the gods, would recognize their labor. Hopping, they too would be remembered. You leave it where you found it. Somehow it feels wrong to move. The quiet collapse. Late in the day, while hauling sand out from a side tunnel, you hear it. A pop, a thud, a single sharp exhale. A stone shifted, a tunnel gave in. You run with others to the noise and find a man, his leg pinned, screaming. Dust clouds the space. The foreman is there in moments. He orders men to lift the stone. But it takes too long. When they finally roll it away, the man's head is tilted oddly. His eyes are open but blank. The tunnel is braced. The name is recorded. The work resumes within the hour. When you are gone, you think sometimes about your own tomb. You will not have a pyramid. You will not be buried with jars or gold. No priest will say your name. If you're lucky, you'll be laid beneath a simple stone near the workers' village. Perhaps your son will leave a mark. Perhaps a generation later, someone will ask who built the king's chamber shaft. They won't know, but the shaft will still be there. The prayer without words. That night you do not speak. You lie in your corner, your skin coated in powder, your muscles twitching. Outside, the stars begin to appear, though you don't rise to see them. You whisper a quiet thought, not to the gods, not to the pharaoh, not even to yourself. Just into the dark. A prayer not of words, but of worn hands, chipped tools, and quiet defiance. And it lingers faintly, like limestone dust in the lungs. The day begins without ceremony. No drums, no incense, no royal decree. Just the soft scrape of sandals on packed earth, and the familiar whisper of tools being lifted again. But there is a difference now. You feel it in your chest, in the eyes of the overseers, in the tension that buzzes under the routine. Something is ending, and something sacred is beginning. The day of the seal. Today you are not carving, not hauling, not painting or hauling stone. Today, the king's chamber is being sealed. The pharaoh divine and immortal is already entombed. You didn't see the procession, but you heard of it. Priests in leopard skins, mourners wailing, oxen bearing gilded sledges. The book of the dead was read aloud. The sarcophagus was lowered. The last oil lamps were snuffed out by high-ranking priests. Now the chamber will be closed forever. You are one of the handful chosen to witness the final placement of the massive granite portcullis blocks, which will slide into place like the tongue of the earth itself, locking the king inside, and possibly locking you out. But there's a whisper passed quietly between stonecutters. Not all will leave before the last block falls. The one who stayed. There are stories told in the workers' village never aloud, always near the ovens late at night, of the man who stayed behind. A builder chosen by priests, tasked with ensuring the inner mechanisms were set properly after the king's body was placed. He carried no tool, just a lamp and a copper rod to check alignment. He did not return. His family was compensated, but his name was stricken from the rolls, as if he had never existed. No one speaks of it near the scribes, but you remember. And as the passage stones begin to slide into place, you catch the eye of the chief architect. For a brief second you wonder, is it my turn? But he looks away, and your breath returns. The final block. The stone is massive, over 50 tons, hewn in Aswan and hauled hundreds of miles by barge and sled and sweat. It has waited for this moment for months, resting just outside the descending shaft. Dozens of workers pull the ropes. Others coat the guide rails with oil and crushed reed to ease the descent. It does not move easily. You hear the wood creak, the ropes groan, men grunt and strain, and then a deep, resonant boom as the stone slides into place, dust billowing into the corridor like the breath of the gods themselves. The passage is gone. The king is alone. And the pyramid becomes a world unto itself. What you built. It's over now, at least this part. You walk through the corridors one last time. The torchlight flickers against walls that you helped smooth, corners you helped align. You know where your chisel slipped, where you bled, where you sweat in silence. You trace one faint groove, your mark, though no one knows it. Just a line in the stone, half an inch long, forgotten, but real. Outside, the pyramid gleams under the sky. It looks clean, divine, eternal. But you know better. You know its belly, the broken tools, the collapsed tunnels, the men who died and were buried in gravel. You built not just a monument. You built a memory of labor. The pyramid sleeps. Years pass. You return only once, long after your arms have lost their strength and your beard has gone gray. The pyramid is still standing, the stone still white against the sun. But something is different. It no longer feels sacred. It feels silent, distant, as if it has forgotten you. Tourists come now, nobles, scribes, foreign envoys. They speak of the greatness of Pharaoh, of the genius of the architects. No one mentions the tunnelers, the dust, the lungs full of sand. But you remember, and you whisper your name to the wind that scrapes the base of the stones. Just once, beneath our feet. Centuries later, archaeologists will marvel at the construction, the alignment with true north, the precision of the sarcophagus, the weight of the ceiling slabs, the hieroglyphs on hidden beams. They will speak of gods and kings and the celestial order. They will not know the name of the man who cut the shaft by hand, or the woman who cooked for the workers, or the child who left a clay toy in a trench later covered in sand. But the stone remembers, not in words, not in glory, but in permanence. And beneath every step they take, your chisel marks remain buried, silent, and immovable.